Hi, my name is Phil Parks, and I'm the founder of Parenting for Adulthood. And I thought what we'd do is shoot a quick video letting you see just a quick glimpse of one of the most important segments of what we start and build a foundation on in our 6-hour course. The topic is communication. And basically, as a pastoral counselor for my church, one of the things that I have found is that I do a lot of work with couples, because I do primarily couples counseling, and how to better communicate. And when you look at the communication that parents have, either good or bad, you have to understand it does have an impact on your children as they grow up. The first 5 to 6 years of a child's life, you've probably heard it, that their brain is like a sponge, just soaking up information. And that's very true. Added to that, that because they don't have any ability to recognize whether it's true or whether it's false, everything they're seeing, everything they're hearing is deemed to be valid and true. So for example, if you have parents that are always arguing and screaming and swearing at each other, basically children grow up thinking that that is the normal way that families communicate and operate. And they later take that on into their type of personality traits as they grow older, because that's what they're used to seeing. And it continues to be validated as they get older, because if you're screaming and arguing when they're 5 or 6, you're still screaming and arguing when they're 11, 12, 15, 18, and on. Conversely, if you have parents that are communicating correctly, and we'll get into that in a second, where everything that is being said by one of the partners is being 100% listened to by the other partner, and then it's validated, and they explain each other's thoughts and promises, and they show empathy and love, and they're not screaming and yelling, that becomes what that little brain soaks up and views as being normal, and therefore it's true, and this is how relationships in homes should be. And just like the other, because it's a formed way of communicating, they see it when they're 11, when they're 12, when they're 15, whether they're 18, and on. So early on, we need to help parents understand communication. So we spend the best part of at least an hour with 35 to 40 minutes working with and role-playing with parents so that they understand proper communication. So the key to this is listening to learn what your partner is saying. If you want to look it up on the internet, it's called active learning. But basically, listening to learn is the key to it. When you are listening and you're just waiting for your partner to either take a breath or to finish the sentence that they're in, and then you quickly throw in your comments, you've stopped listening. All you're waiting for is to be able to give your 2 cents worth. And that usually leads to arguments on both sides. And that's, for example, if you're listening were like water, it would be coming down and hitting a brick and just bouncing off. And that's not good communication, and that's not what we strive to have for parents with young children. What we would rather have is the parents have that communication be like a sponge, the water hitting a sponge, and the sponge soaks up everything. And basically in active listening, you listen to everything your partner says. If need be, you repeat it back to them in your own words to make sure that there's no miscommunication, and then life goes on. And in the perfect world, and believe me, in the counseling that I do, this is exactly where we go. The parents never have to agree. They don't have to agree. But what they do, once they each has heard the other side, one of them decides how important it is to them versus how important it is to their partner. And then they say, you know what, you know my point on this, but I'm going to back you. And you've got 100% of my support. And no matter how this turns out, even if it's negative, I'm never going to say I told you so, because we're in this together. And that's what children need to be seeing as they're growing up. So we're going to be showing you here just a quick illustration of water hitting the sponge. so that you kind of get an idea of it, and water hitting a brick. And which of the two ways do you want your communication to be going? Now, one of the things that communication gets for you when you have this really good communication is you get to learn, or your children get to learn, that they can communicate with you about everything. Yeah, there's going to be times they get in trouble, but they know that when they talk to you, you're listening and that you're interested and you're vested in what they're saying. One of the things that we'd like you to do is erase the word why right out of your vocabulary. The word why, we've learned in counseling, is that basically internally as an adult, I will start to shut down when I hear why, because it's a threat. And as I've grown up, and as you've probably grown up, the word why, didn't you get your homework done? Why didn't you get better grades? Why didn't you take the garbage out? Why didn't you cut the grass? Why didn't you put the dishes away? Why didn't you fill the dishwasher? Why didn't you put the laundry out? Just on and on, why. And we grow to learn that why means uh-oh. And that's not what we want. We don't want your children internally starting to already tune out. So by never having the word why in your vocabulary with each other and with the children, you get a better form of communication. So what do you mean by that, Phil? And how does it work? Well, let's give an example where a child comes home. They've been out for a weekend and at an overnight sleep. Let's do that. And make him 11 to 13 years old. I think that's about the right age that you might see some of this. And your child comes home and says, Mom, we've always been able to talk, and I know you're not going to like what I have to say, but I want to tell you that I smoked marijuana this weekend at the sleepover. Now, most times, parents are just going to blow up. I would imagine, had I been faced with that at that young age, I definitely would have blown up. And it doesn't accomplish anything. Yes, the child eventually is going to have some repercussions from what they did. And you can set that up by saying, okay, all right, thank you for coming and sharing that with me. Obviously, we're going to have to talk about some type of consequences. But what's more important to me is, can you walk me through what led up to that? What made you want to try marijuana? Walk me around with that. Help me out. Help me understand. And by those open-end questions, and not rushing to judgment and not immediately grounding them, you'll start to get the information that you like. You might also want to say, listen, hey, we're not going to tell the parents of these other children. This is strictly between you and me. I care about you, and I just want to know what got us to this point. And then ultimately, what's even more important, and if you jump off the handle and you ground them and you send them to the room, most likely you'll never have this conversation, which I think you'll agree with me is the most important conversation to have. So, tell me, at the next sleepover, on a scale of 1 to 10, or 5 to 1, or whatever you want to do it, what's the likelihood that you're going to try marijuana again? I'd like to know what your thinking is on that, and help me understand what your thinking is. Now, that kind of communication and that type of open-end questioning is going to get you the information that you're looking for, so that you can make the correct decisions about whether maybe they need to start seeing different friends, or whatever it is that you find out during those talkative few minutes. But that's the gold when it comes to better communication between parents and children. So that was a hypothetical situation, and honestly, I think it's probably more realistic than not. But as a pastoral counselor, let me give you an example of a client that came into me, and he said, I need some help. I think somehow my wife and I have, our little 7-year-old daughter wants to know why mommy and daddy aren't cuddling anymore, and why we don't love each other. And so I had him explain to me, what's going on. Well, he's been coming to me for a while, and I recognized, and as we got to talking about it, his wife had been a stay-at-home mom with their 2 kids, and then also for extra money babysat a couple of children. And so naturally, while she was at home, she got all the things done that she wanted to get done as a stay-at-home mom, which in itself is a full-time job and probably more difficult than most men would want to consider and probably even do. But now all of a sudden she's taken on a part-time job and she's working 3.5 days a week. So her time at home now, they're splitting duties, mom and dad, vacuuming, laundry, dishes, cleaning bedrooms, changing sheets, all the things that as a stay-at-home mom she did. And basically once the kids had their bath and they were put to bed, that's when they would settle down and have some me time or together time for them. And what the child had seen is that they're no longer sitting on the couch cuddling and watching TV with them because they had to do all these other things. The end result was, because the child felt that they could do a good job of communicating, and that's the one thing I made sure he understood, be thankful that you've taken the time to really work with communication with your wife and with your children, because they gave you a hint as to something that was bothering them. Rather than keeping it bottled up inside and compartmentalized and mommy and daddy don't love each other and who knows where that goes, they asked the question, and then he was able to go home and sit with his mom, his wife, her mom, and their other child, and explain to them that mommy and daddy still love each other. But here's what's going on. And because you've shown us what you've just told us, we're now going to spend a little bit of time doing what we used to do, watching TV and having some fun before bath time. And then mommy and daddy will do the laundry and the vacuuming and changing the sheets and dishes and so forth after you go to bed. And so what we've done is we've taken that open communication to a whole new level where now the children are responding and they're telling you something that they see and you're able to make a correction for it. These are just some of the gems that we go through in a 6-hour course of preparing parents to have their children better prepared for adulthood.